Before Light Yagami ever killed a criminal, before the God complex, before the whispered name Kira spread across the world, his fate was already sealed. Not by El, not by Nier, but by a single, quiet belief forming inside his mind, that he alone was capable of deciding who deserved to live. From that moment on, Death Note stopped being a cat-and-mouse thriller and became something far more disturbing, a slow, inevitable psychological collapse disguised as justice. Why Light Yagami was doomed from Episode 1 is not a question about intelligence, strategy, or luck. It's a warning about moral certainty. Death Note isn't a story about how power corrupts. It's about how the belief that you are morally incorruptible guarantees your downfall. Light doesn't fail because he makes mistakes. He fails because his worldview makes failure unavoidable. At first glance, Light appears almost perfectly designed to succeed. He's disciplined, intelligent, and deeply dissatisfied with a world he sees as rotten. But beneath that calm exterior is something colder, a rigid, black and white moral framework. Criminal equals evil. Evil deserves death. No ambiguity. No exception. The moment Light tests the Death Note, there's no hesitation, no trembling doubt, no moral recoil. Instead, there is exhilaration, a sense of alignment between his intellect and what he perceives as cosmic justice. This is not the reaction of someone burdened by power. It's the reaction of someone who feels validated by it. And this is crucial. Light doesn't slowly become Kira. Kira is not an alter ego born later. Kira exists the instant Light decides that his judgment is superior to humanity's collective uncertainty. Every subsequent lie, manipulation, and sacrifice is not a deviation from his original self. It's a logical extension of it. What makes this tragic is that Light genuinely believes he is selfless. He tells himself that the fear, isolation, and bloodshed are unfortunate necessities. But listen carefully to his inner monologues. The language shifts quickly from "for the world" to "for my world." Justice becomes indistinguishable from ego. And from that point on, Light is no longer playing a game he can win, only one he can prolong. Light's intelligence is often praised, but intelligence is not wisdom. In fact, it accelerates his collapse. Because every time Light faces opposition, he doesn't question his premise, only the efficiency of his methods. When innocent people die, he reframes it as collateral. When allies become inconvenient, they become expendable. The most revealing moments are not Light's victories, but his moments of frustration. When challenged, his composure fractures into rage. Not because he might be wrong, but because someone dares to doubt him. This emotional volatility exposes the truth. Light doesn't just want to create a better world. He wants to be acknowledged as its architect. And that need is fatal, because the moment justice demands recognition, it stops being justice. To understand why Light was doomed, we have to step outside anime and into psychology. Specifically, the concept of moral absolutism combined with narcissistic traits. Studies in moral psychology show that individuals who view morality as rigid and binary, good versus evil, pure versus corrupt, are far more likely to justify extreme actions. Once a person defines themselves as on the side of good, almost any behavior can be rationalized. This is known as moral licensing, the belief that righteous intent excuses immoral acts. Light also exhibits traits associated with narcissistic personality structures, not necessarily clinical narcissism, but the dangerous overlap of grandiosity, lack of empathy, and an inflated sense of responsibility. He doesn't merely believe he is right. He believes he is necessary. This mindset mirrors a chilling real-world pattern. History's most destructive figures rarely saw themselves as villains. They saw themselves as cleaners of chaos, architects of order, saviors burdened with terrible choices. In the 20th century, some of the most devastating regimes were built on the same logic Light adopts, that society could be purified if the right people held absolute authority. Totalitarian systems often begin with promises of safety, order, and moral clarity. Crime will end. Degeneracy will be erased. The world will be fixed. But these systems fail for the same reason Light fails. Once a single ideology defines justice, dissent becomes evil. And once dissent is evil, extermination becomes logical. Light's world mirrors this progression with eerie precision. Crime rates drop. Fear rises. Obedience replaces morality. The world doesn't become better, it becomes quieter. And silence, in Death Note, is never peace. It's submission. When we merge the psychological and historical lens back into Death Note, Light's downfall stops feeling tragic and starts feeling unavoidable. His greatest weakness was never L's intelligence or Nier's persistence. It was his inability to tolerate uncertainty. True justice requires humility, the acceptance that no single human perspective is sufficient. Light rejects this completely. He doesn't just want to reduce crime. He wants to eliminate ambiguity. And ambiguity is the one thing human society cannot survive without. In the end, Light isn't defeated by a smarter opponent. He's exposed, cornered by the weight of his own assumptions. When his authority collapses, there is no moral core left, only desperation. The god vanishes, and what remains is a frightened young man screaming that the world can't exist without him. Death Note endures because it doesn't ask whether Light was right or wrong. It asks something far more unsettling. How many of us, given enough power and enough certainty, would make the same choice? Because the most dangerous belief isn't that evil exists, but that we are incapable of becoming it.